Verstappen leaving Red Bull just became real. Not because of a rumor. Because his own manager finally confirmed the exit clause everyone suspected. If Verstappen is not first or second in the championship by the Hungarian Grand Prix, he could walk away from Red Bull for zero transfer fee, and right now, he is only 7th, more than 100 points behind Mercedes rookie Kimi Antonelli. That is why Mercedes are accelerating. Red Bull are reportedly trying to buy out the clause. Russell's contract future is still under pressure. Antonelli is leading the championship. And Toto Wolff may suddenly have a chance to sign the one driver who could change the entire sport again. But here is the dangerous part. If Mercedes go for Verstappen, they may not just destroy Red Bull's future. They may blow up their own team from the inside. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why this exit clause changes everything, you have to understand what Red Bull thought they had. Security. That was the whole point of Verstappen's long-term contract. A deal running until the end of 2028 was supposed to protect Red Bull from exactly this kind of crisis. It was supposed to tell the paddock that Verstappen was not available, that Mercedes could dream as much as they wanted, and that Red Bull's most valuable asset was locked away. But a contract is only as strong as the conditions inside it. And now, for the first time, Verstappen's own camp has made the most important condition public. He can be loyal. He can want to finish his career at Red Bull. He can respect the team, the history, and everything they built together. But only if he has the opportunity to win. That one condition is the center of the entire story. Because Red Bull are not failing emotionally. They are failing competitively. And for Verstappen, that is the one failure that matters most. This is not a driver looking for a bigger name, a larger salary, or a cleaner image. This is a driver who has already been world champion multiple times. He does not need attention. He does not need validation. He does not need to prove that he belongs at the front. He needs a car that can win. And right now, Red Bull are not giving him that. That is why the clause is so dangerous. It takes the feeling of frustration and turns it into a mechanism. It takes a bad season and gives it a contractual consequence. It takes the championship table and makes it more powerful than any press statement from Red Bull. Because if Verstappen is not first or second by the Hungarian Grand Prix, the door can open. No transfer fee. No long negotiation with Red Bull holding all the cards. No comfortable assumption that the contract protects them. Just a driver suddenly free, because the performance condition was not met. That is why the timing is devastating. If the clause were active at the end of the season, Red Bull would have more time. They could bring upgrades. They could stabilize the car. They could create a recovery story. They could tell Verstappen that the project is turning around. But the deadline comes before the summer break. That means Red Bull do not have a season to fix this. They have a few races to change the feeling, the results, and the belief around the entire team. And the standings are brutal. Verstappen is not third, close enough to make the clause feel theoretical. He is not one good weekend away from safety. He is 7th. Far behind Kimi Antonelli, far behind the top positions, and sitting in a place that makes the exit condition feel less like a threat and more like a countdown. That is why Red Bull are reportedly trying to buy out the clause. Because when a team starts exploring paying low double-digit millions in euros just to remove a driver's exit route, it tells you something important. They are not calm. They are not fully protected. They are not treating this as noise. They know the danger is real. And they know Mercedes are waiting. Mercedes have been connected to Verstappen before. Toto Wolff has never completely killed the idea, because smart team principles do not close doors to generational drivers. They manage the message. They protect their current lineup. They say the right things in public. But behind the scenes, they keep options alive. That is what Mercedes have done. And now the situation has shifted in their favor. Before, signing Verstappen meant trying to pull him out of a long Red Bull contract. That sounded difficult, expensive, and politically explosive. Now, the clause means Mercedes may not need to break the contract at all. They only need to be ready if the contract breaks itself. That changes the entire calculation. Because Mercedes are not chasing a fantasy anymore. They are monitoring a deadline. And Verstappen's camp has placed that deadline into the open. Raymond Vermeulen's words were carefully chosen. He did not say Verstappen is leaving. He did not attack Red Bull. He did not burn the bridge. He spoke about loyalty, about wanting to continue, about Verstappen wanting to finish his career there. But then he made the condition impossible to ignore. The opportunity to win. That is the line Red Bull now has to answer. Not with history. Not with emotion. Not with old trophies. With performance. And that is the hardest thing to fake in Formula 1. You can talk about development direction. You can promise upgrades. You can show simulation numbers. You can tell a driver that the next race will be better. But a driver like Verstappen feels the truth through the steering wheel. He knows when the car is alive. He knows when it can fight. He knows when a podium is the ceiling. And right now, Red Bull are not operating in the world Verstappen expects. That is why the public confirmation was so powerful. For months, the paddock could treat the clause as something rumored, something whispered, something mentioned by insiders but not fully owned by Verstappen's side. Once his manager confirmed the existence of exit clauses and connected the future to winning conditions, the story became real in a different way. Red Bull can no longer pretend the outside world is inventing pressure. The pressure is now coming from the contract. And contracts do not care about legacy. That is the coldest part. Red Bull's past with Verstappen is enormous. Championships, records, domination, iconic wins, years of building the team around him. But the clause is about the present. It asks one simple question. Can Red Bull give him the chance to win now? If the answer is no, Mercedes become more than a rumor. They become the obvious escape route. And that is where the whole driver market begins to shake. Because Mercedes are not empty. They already have drivers. Antonelli is leading the championship as a rookie, which makes him almost untouchable politically. Russell is experienced, fast, and deeply connected to the team, but his contract situation has been under pressure for a long time. That creates the first internal problem. If Verstappen becomes available, Mercedes have to decide whether to protect stability or chase the biggest prize on the market. Stability means keeping Russell and Antonelli, trusting the current structure, and avoiding internal disruption during a title fight. Chasing Verstappen means accepting that one of the strongest driver lineups on the grid might still be upgraded, but at a huge political cost. That is why this story is not only about Red Bull panic. It is also about Mercedes' risk. Because signing Verstappen would not be a normal signing. He would not arrive quietly. He would not be just another fast driver. He would arrive with the weight of championships, expectation, and dominance. He would instantly change the balance of the garage. Antonelli would no longer be the only future. Russell could lose his seat. Wolff would have to manage the most explosive lineup decision in the sport. And Mercedes would have to ask whether the performance gain is worth the internal shock. That is the reason this clause is so powerful. It does not only give Verstappen a way out. It forces every major team to reveal what they really value. Red Bull value security, so they may pay to remove the clause. Mercedes value opportunity, so they may accelerate talks. Russell values clarity, but may be forced to wait. Antonelli values momentum, but may suddenly face the shadow of the most successful active driver of the previous era. And Verstappen values winning, which means everyone else is now reacting to his standard. That is how one clause becomes a paddock earthquake. Not because it guarantees a move. Because it makes a move possible at the exact moment Red Bull look weakest. And possibility is enough to start chaos. Because once possibility enters Formula One, every sentence gets reinterpreted. Every team statement becomes coded. Every delayed contract renewal becomes suspicious. Every Red Bull upgrade becomes a message. Every Mercedes comment becomes a signal. Every Verstappen result becomes evidence. That is where we are now. Red Bull are no longer simply trying to improve the car. They are trying to convince Verstappen there is still a future worth staying for. Mercedes are no longer simply managing their current drivers. They are deciding whether to prepare for a once-in-a-generation opportunity. And Verstappen does not need to rush. That is the most powerful part. He can wait. He can let the standings speak. He can let Red Bull feel the pressure. He can let Mercedes think about the seat. He can let the summer break deadline move closer, race by race, until everyone understands the same truth. For the first time in years, Max Verstappen's Red Bull future is not protected by assumption. It is being tested by performance. And right now, Red Bull are failing the test. But now the story moves from Red Bull fear to Mercedes opportunity. Because Verstappen's clause does not automatically put him in a Mercedes. It only opens the door. What matters next is whether Mercedes are willing to step through it. And that is where everything becomes complicated. On the surface, Mercedes should not need Verstappen. They have Kimi Antonelli leading the championship. They have George Russell still fighting near the front. They have the strongest team in the current competitive order. They have the car that Red Bull wish they had, and the momentum that Verstappen's camp is demanding. So why would Mercedes risk destabilizing all of that? Because Max Verstappen is not a normal option. He is the kind of driver teams do not evaluate like everyone else. They do not ask only whether he fits the lineup. They ask whether they can afford to let someone else have him. They ask whether passing on him now means watching him win somewhere else later. They ask whether the short-term discomfort is worth the long-term control. That is why Toto Wolff has never truly closed the door. He has cooled the story at times. He has defended his current drivers. He has said Mercedes have solid contracts. But when it comes to Verstappen, the language has never felt permanently final. Because Wolff understands something very simple. Drivers like Verstappen almost never become available. And if they do, hesitation can be fatal. That is the Mercedes dilemma. The team already has a winning structure, but Verstappen could turn that structure into something even more frightening. Put him in a competitive Mercedes, and suddenly the entire championship landscape changes. Red Bull lose their reference point. Ferrari face a stronger rival. McLaren see the target move further away. And Mercedes own the driver market as well as the racetrack. But the price is internal chaos. Because signing Verstappen would force Mercedes to answer the question they have been delaying. What happens to Russell? Russell has lived with this uncertainty for too long. He was the one who publicly acknowledged that Mercedes had been having conversations involving Verstappen. That was not a small statement. A driver does not say that unless he knows the situation is real enough to affect him. And for Russell, every Verstappen headline cuts deeper because his own future is not sealed in the same way Antonelli's appears to be. Antonelli is the revelation. The rookie leading the championship. The 19-year-old who has become the face of Mercedes' next era almost overnight. Replacing him would be almost impossible unless something dramatic changed. Russell is different. He is fast. He is experienced. He is valuable. But he is also the driver most exposed if Mercedes decide that Verstappen must be signed. That is why Verstappen's exit clause is not just a Red Bull problem. It is a Russell problem. Because every race Verstappen remains outside the top two, every report about the clause, every mention of Mercedes talks, makes Russell's contract situation feel less like a normal negotiation and more like a holding pattern. And holding patterns are dangerous in Formula One. They make drivers feel evaluated every weekend. They make every result carry extra meaning. They make every teammate comparison sharper. They make every public comment sound defensive, even when it is calm. Russell now has to fight on two fronts. On track, he has to keep proving he belongs beside Antonelli. Off track, he has to hope Mercedes do not decide Verstappen is too big to ignore. That is a brutal position for any driver. Because Russell can do a lot right and still be vulnerable. He can score podiums. He can win races. He can lead the team in development. He can be professional, fast, reliable, and mature. But if Verstappen becomes free, the question is no longer whether Russell is good enough. The question becomes whether Mercedes believe Verstappen is better enough. That is the cruel difference. And it is exactly why Mercedes are accelerating the conversation. Not necessarily because they have already decided to replace Russell, but because the window may be short. If Red Bull succeed in buying out the clause, the door could close. If Verstappen's camp decides Mercedes are not serious, the opportunity could drift. If the summer break arrives without clarity, the whole market could freeze in a strange and dangerous way. So Mercedes have to be ready. They have to know what they would offer. They have to know which seat would open. They have to know how Antonelli would react. They have to know how Russell would be managed. They have to know whether Verstappen would accept a teammate like Antonelli, who is not a support act, but a championship leader. That last question is enormous. Because a Verstappen and Antonelli pairing sounds spectacular, but it also sounds explosive. Antonelli is not arriving as a quiet junior. He is already leading the championship. He is not waiting to become Mercedes' future. He is living it now. If Verstappen came in, Mercedes would suddenly have a generational rookie and a four-time world champion inside the same garage. That could be the strongest lineup on the grid. It could also become unmanageable. Because Verstappen does not join teams to share attention. He joins to win. Antonelli is already winning. Mercedes would have to manage two drivers who both believe they are the center of the project. That is a dream for performance. And a nightmare for politics. Wolff knows this. He has managed powerful driver pairings before. He understands that a dominant car can create the hardest internal problems. When both drivers can win, every strategy call becomes sensitive. Every upgrade priority becomes a question. Every qualifying result becomes evidence. Every team order becomes a scandal waiting to happen.